Welcome to
Hello. Oh.
yes to DnDTime Talks, where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. Hello, also I'm Pete.
I'm Jeremy. I got a haircut.
You look good, Jeremy. I like
I
the it's very
feel good.
suave.
It's weird. Do you see there's a barber shop. There's a barber shop across the street from me. And it's a very like I don't know, it's like one of those like hip barber shops, I guess. I don't know. It kind of has that like sort of gangster feel to it. So not really hip at all. Anyway, the point is they do really good cutting of the hair. They're very good.
I just
How
realized
about
that
you, Pete?
I just realized that I was extremely close to the camera, and there's just my whole head in the frame. So I fixed that just now.
I think the chat liked it. Shiba, Blood, I see you guys hanging out. Did you like when Pete's head was closer to the camera?
Do you want me to just like? We can just do like a close up on my eyes for the rest of D&D time in its entirety if you would like. But I don't want people to see that close to me. I got secrets on my face that
You
people
got
aren't meant to
secrets on
see.
your face?
Yeah, I got all kinds of secrets, like campaign secrets that you guys haven't figured out yet. So I can't go and reveal those just
I
yet.
understand that. Pete,
Hi,
I'm
Maddie.
zooming in my camera, and now my face is going to be... Now you're going to have to just deal with the fact that I'm got a big face.
And
well,
we'll
you don't,
also
Pete.
have to deal with the fact that tonight we're talking about what are we talking about tonight, Jeremy?
All right, my
Jeremy
face
the
is
Meat
normal
Pants.
again. We are talking about a bunch of different things. But really, we're focusing on basically how to run your first sessions, right? How to lay the groundwork, the framework, plant those seeds, weave those webs of your future stories and NPCs. Ways to really set up a successful campaign. And we've talked about some of these things before in the past, but with our first episode of Dragon Heist that I just ran, and there was a lot of this weaving and planting and all sorts of chaos. I don't know. I thought it was a really good opportunity to maybe, talk about it again.
Corporate synergy, like we always try to employ here at D&D Time. So, as we kind of dive into this topic, we're going to be flowing around a little bit, I think, talking about a lot of different stuff today. But if you have any questions or comments, please ask them in chat. And likewise, if you have maybe off-topic or just general D&D questions or anything that you want to say to us, hop on our Discord under Ask Pete and Jeremy, and we will answer any questions there at the end of the show tonight.
Yeah, and I want to take immediately, before we even start, let's take this tangent right here and work with it. Fluffy, or Psychopath23, in the chat says, know the rules so the players can't walk all over you, and then he made the very lots of crying face emoji. I don't know.
So many rules.
So many rules, though. Here's the thing. I used to be the rules lawyer back in 4th edition. That was me. I knew every rule. I could lawyer any situation into anything. Like, I had a rogue in my party that I played. I was not the dungeon master, of course. I was a player. I was a cleric, and one of my friends was a rogue. And what would happen is he'd go and roll to hit, and he'd be like, "Ah, damn, I missed. Jeremy, can you give me a +2 somewhere?" And I'd look at the board for a little bit. Oh yeah, and that's how the game would go. I would just figure out the bullshit thing that no one else realized to make it work. But here's the thing. When you have a player like that wants to like beat around, like use the rules as a weapon against you or as like a tool in the game, there's a really easy way I have found to deal with that kind of person, and it worked in dealing with me. And that is, as the DM, you just assign them to be your rules guru. Because they, like, for me, as like a rules lawyer person, I can't help it, even if the rules play against me. I can't help but see them. And if the DM tells me, Jeremy, I want you to really, help me out with this because I'm not super good with all these rules or whatnot. Oh man. I can't help but like literally drown my own character. It just happens. Anyway, tangent. But that was my recommendation. You don't have to know all the rules. Just assign one of your players who does like reading the rules and knowing the rules to do it for you. And then whenever something comes up, be like, hey, what's the rule for that? And they'll feel awesome, and you won't have to know all the rules inside and out.
And while the I'd say this is something that you should do sparingly. But
I
if the
disagree. I
rules,
love it.
or
Oh
no,
wait,
I'm not
sorry.
saying your thing. It's a different thing. Um, if one of your players is kind of like being aggressive with you about the rules and kind of like telling you that something that they're doing has to work a certain way, even though that you as a DM have decided like, oh well, this creature can just this creature just ignores difficult terrain because of this other reason, and your player has some kind of rule that they say, well, actually that's not in the rules. As a DM, you can just say, well, no, I'm the DM, and that's how it works. Or any other kind of rule. You don't have to necessarily be completely beholden, especially when it comes to things that you control. If a player's telling you how something that you're kind of in control of works, you're allowed to just shut them down. If it's something that they're doing that it's generally a bad idea to not let the players characters work the way they are supposed to work in the rules, because that'll feel really bad as a player.
Well, it's also a thing, right? Where like it depends on the kind of rules. Because like Sheba was saying, that the solution, Bionic Sheba in chat was saying like D&D is a framework for a tabletop, and the rules are up to interpretation and change based on the dungeon master and the players.
Natch.
And like, yeah, absolutely. But like, it's a kind of deal where if you're gonna, if you change, you got to know the rules to change the rules, right? You have to understand the implications of what you're changing before you change it. And there are certain things like, if it's like a super rarely, let's say you're not playing a naval campaign and your players are on a ship and they're sailing around and they get attacked by pirates and they're immediately going to get off this ship, right? They're just going to leave and they're never going to go sailing again because they hate it. You can just make up the rules for how that ship combat's going to work. You don't have to follow rules as they might exist
Yes.
because it just doesn't like it's a one time, it's a rare situation. Whereas like, maybe like a rogue trying to use the hide action so they can get their sneak attack. If you're gonna change how those rules work from the actual core mechanics, and that's what Pete was saying too, like that's gonna come up all the time because your rogue wants to hide to get their sneak attack. So that's the kind
Uh,
of thing you really need to know and really understand the rules for it before you go and change it.
And as one last note, just getting back to the original question, know the rules, the original statement, know the rules so players can't walk all over you. Yeah, I mean, it's still, even though you can break them, and even though they're guidelines, it's still good to know the rules as well as you can. If you have,
Oh, of course, yeah.
the opportunity, it's
I
always better.
still
It's always better to know them than not to know
reading the monsters also helpful. Geez, the number of times I've been in a game and it's like, oh, this monster's the right challenge rating, and then it's just like, oh, we're almost all dead, and there are still 6 of them left. Good thing you read that one, Dungeon Master. Oh yeah, yeah. I probably should not. I probably should have read what the monster did before I sent 8 of them. That was a terrifying, terrifying encounter.
them.
Ugh.
Yeah, like intellect devourers are a good one of those where the
Oh,
CR does not.
they're
The CR does not reflect the challenge.
There aren't too many of those like trap monsters in 5e.
Yeah,
Where
flame
like
skulls.
Flame Skulls. Oh my god, Flame Skulls are so fucked up for the challenge rating.
It's because Fireball's so fucked up for its spell level.
Oh, I know,
But
right?
these
I was
things are
gonna,
aside
Pete.
the
We
point.
can continue to get distracted. I'm liking this conversation.
Uh,
No, I kid. Let's
yeah, I was just
jump
saying
forward
we
a
should
little.
get back to it. So the thing that we're kind of talking about today, we were talking about running your first few adventures. What it's worthwhile to put into them, what perhaps it's not worthwhile to put into them, and how to make your players kind of feel that the game's gotten off to an exciting start while also still kind of seeding and keeping things moving for the future, and setting the groundwork for a larger both web kind of perhaps intrigue, but just a larger web of plot lines and story arcs and so on to get your campaign really moving.
Yeah, I mean, I really like throwing tons of stuff at the players. For anyone who watched the first episode of Waterdeep Dragon Heist entitled "A Friend in Need," you can check it out on our VODs or YouTube. But man, I just put so much stuff in that adventure. So many little details that I feel like as viewers, you probably maybe didn't realize had significance. And as players, there definitely was some stuff going over people's heads. Uh And that's
I got
awesome,
every
right?
single one, Jeremy.
Except for Pete. Yeah, there's like 10 plot lines. Exactly, Sheba. Exactly. To the point where, but the thing is, they were small details, and I think that's a thing we're going to be talking about, right? Is how to kind of put those in, how to weave those in.
Yeah. And I think the answer as to how to weave those in, it's probably a fairly simple one, and that is it's actually pretty easy to weave those things in. You just put things if you're in, especially at the start of a campaign, when players, I think on the first session of the campaign, players are more than they will ever be again in the campaign, tuned in to the small details that you're putting out before them, because when things begin, you're looking for an adventure. You're looking to get going, and from a kind of a meta perspective, which this is the kind of healthy metagaming, I think. Players are like, oh, we want to find where the fun is and where this adventure starts to begin. So if you make a note of anything in your first adventure, if you say, for example, like you find a mysterious stone, or there's someone over on the side of the tavern that's having a kind of a muted conversation that you can't hear, or perhaps a cart whizzes by you very quickly. All things specifically that happened in our first session that Jeremy recently ran. Your players are going to instantly think like, okay, well, this is something that this has weight. It wouldn't be brought up in the first session if this didn't have some significance to the campaign at large. It's not just a random detail.
Well, precisely. And certain things, right, you can give more or less emphasis, and also more or less opaqueness, right? You can be somewhat discreet with certain. For example, in Dragon Heist, the incident with the wagon, because a player was hit by that wagon whizzing by, right? There was almost a disarming thought in terms of recognizing that as maybe being a significant thing, especially in the future, because that was just a random encounter. I just took damage, right? This is a combat thing. This isn't a information thing. Whereas moving to, say, the person I described standing in the back of the tavern, this skeevy, sneaky-looking person with the black hood, right? That's obviously just a plot detail. I have described that there is a person there. I have gone out of my way for no other seeming purpose than to describe the person. This obviously out of place.
Yeah.
So you can hide things, right? You can hide them in combat. You can hide them in conversation. You can hide them in just general description. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say it. And players are smart, and they will they will just pay attention to those things and key in. And again, as a player, there is absolutely nothing wrong with choosing to notice that stuff and choosing to make it significant, because like I think something, and this is something that doesn't happen to new players, but I think once you become an experienced player, you start to have those thoughts like, well, there's this guy talking over in the corner. Would my character care about going over and interacting with them? Like, would that be something that I would even occur to a person? And just throw them out of your mind. Just do it. Go over and get things going and start to like play the game, because that's
especially early.
Yeah, especially early on. And as a DM, I think another great thing about what you were doing there, Jeremy, and just generally like having all of these different things that you throw out at the beginning of the game is, and I think this is a kind of a general improv tool as well.
Oh yeah,
you get to just look and see what attracts your player's interest, and then if there's a couple of these things that very much seem to like get the player's gears turning and make them start thinking about the game, then yeah, these are the things I want to focus on. This is what I want to establish and develop and kind of continue to put and kind of tease the players with and have them move down these paths. And that's how you start kind of creating your first story arcs and your first kind of plot lines in the games.
Yeah, exactly. And even though Waterdeep Dragon Heist is a module adventure, right, there's a lot you can play around with and change in that. Say, for example, since we're talking about it, the cloaked figure in the back of the tavern, of that second tavern they visited. That was something that like really appealed to Dangerous Bacon, Kyle, his character. What was his character's name? Oh God, Alahaki.
Alakai, I think, is the pronunciation.
Alakai. Right. So like that character was really into like looking into that, right? Finding out what they could about that masked figure. And that was something that like actually Ilaha, okay. Right, something that actually drew his attention. And I think that's an important thing to note, right? And so maybe I'll have that masked character show up more often. And I'll incorporate that character more deeply into the adventure's kind of core plot because they do have a role, but in the base adventure, they are not a core character. They are there, but they aren't. And I'll probably change that because that's something that has definitely, intrigued a little pull behind the curtains here, but something that's definitely intrigued him as a player, right? This mysterious challenger, not challenger, mysterious stranger who is giving him information, which is something he's decided is a core part of his character.
And that's
I
something
mean,
I would like to even maybe go off on the side a little bit now, because that's such an important part of DMing that I don't think we've ever talked about now, and that is just paying attention to your players,
oh yeah,
and seeing what it is that they react to. DMing, I think, at a very high level, and no one's perfect at it, and it's very hard to balance. Creating the story and focusing on all the little details that you're trying to get in and all your notes, and making sure that all the beats that you want to hit happen, and also as you kind of present these beats to the players, making sure that you pay very close attention to how they're reacting to them and what seems to like get that spark, and what really ignites the players' creativity and imaginations.
I totally agree. I mean, I'd say like the biggest part for me DMing is is a DM on the very low level, right? You run the world, right? You run the enemies when they fight them. You run the NPCs to give them quests, and that's like the very kind of lowest level of dungeon master or game mastering that you can have. That kind of next level is all right. I'm running the monsters and I'm running the NPCs, and there's some kind of maybe there's some tactic or strategy in the fight, and maybe there is some motivation for the NPCs, right? They have a reason, really a good reason for wanting what they want. Then you get to this much higher level where at this point you're paying really close attention to your players and you want your world to be dynamic where the things that the NPCs want as they get accomplished, the world changes and maybe certain things happen if the players don't interact. And then you get to this highest level where you're paying attention to your players and the world is reacting to the players actively, right? Based on what interests them. Not only just what they do, but also what they like. It doesn't matter if you give this awesome intrigue plot that you're so excited to play if none of the players are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. You can never be afraid as a DM to just toss aside plot lines, or just full story arcs if your players are not biting on it and they just seem bored by it. You know, they go into a shop and they're very interested in like the particular shopkeeper character that you've made, and they love interacting with them, and they just like keep going back there over and over again, because they just want to talk to this one particular shopkeeper. um,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not really gelling with your like main quest line. Then incorporate this individual into a new quest. Have that the players kind of interact with the things that they want to, and make those things significant, because that's also what just makes sense logically. Like if the players are more interested in things, they're going to find more detail and more things they can do involved with those, and they wouldn't necessarily go and slay the dragon that you've talked about the other town if that doesn't interest them. They would find ways to do adventuring work in the realms that they enjoy.
Yeah, and what's interesting is like I see, for the most part, I see like when players aren't engaging with something, it's not because it's a bad idea. You know, Sometimes it's because they don't like it, right? Because they're just not really interested in it. Like I know I have at least one player that I play with frequently who hates puzzles. He just does not care. Could not care less about puzzles. Just he really likes combat.
I like
And
puzzles.
eh, and by the same argument, right? Pete loves puzzles. If
I'm
I
not
put a
even good at
puzzle in
them. I
front of
just
Pete,
love
Pete's
puzzles.
gonna be stoked, even if that puzzle whoops his ass. Right? Like you could spend the whole session just in a big puzzle. Farfel also. I think everyone in Dragon Heist likes puzzles. But
Jeremy, oh wait, you've already promised me at least one riddle.
Pete, I have promised you at least one puzzle in Dragon Heist. I promise you that there will be a puzzle. But what was I saying? Yeah, right. A big part of it I tend to notice is if you try and convey an idea or a concept and players just don't quite get it. Like, I know, especially with something like intrigue or puzzles, right? The reason players don't engage with puzzles a lot of time is because they don't realize it's a puzzle. They don't realize it's something you're supposed to be thinking creatively to solve. They just think it's like an actual, like, oh yes, it's a wall of force, right? And they say, oh, okay, it's just a dead end. But you as a DM, you're thinking, no, 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 that wall of force, there's a way to get rid of it and deactivate. You should look around and and the player just doesn't make that connection. And so a lot of the times, like giving a cool hint about that is a really, really cool, a good concept, a good idea. Actually, I was just playing in a game the other day, which the campaign is just starting out. It's a lot of fun so far, run by a friend of mine offline. But in that game, we were in a ancient like facility that builds things, right? It's automated. And in part of it, we came to a conduit in the wall. And it's just like, a circuit board. And as players, well, we're players, right? We're players in Dungeons and Dragons, so like, I'm a ranger. I don't care about circuit boards.
There's only so much you can interact with that
And
logically.
we were confused because it was like, all right, it's there, it's working fine, it's nothing to fix. And he said something that I really would I appreciate. And it's cool because he mentioned this is a great example of how a working one works. And in that moment, what he said was, hey, when you come up with against, like what he effectively said, hey, when you come up to a puzzle later where there's one of these that's broken, you know how to fix it because of this. That's like what he implied, but what he said was, yeah, it's a great example of a working circuit.
The foreshadowing.
Yeah, right. Just the work. I don't think he said working. I think he said a fully functional board. Right. And it's a cool little note to put in there, right? Giving those little bits of foreshadowing.
And I think that to tie it back into kind of our overarching thing of how to set up your first few games, it's a great idea to give your players very clear ideas about what it is that they're going to be doing. You want your players to understand what they're, not necessarily even if they understand their goal, but to understand what kind of actions they're going to be taking. So if you're running a game like Waterdeep Dragon Heist that's going to be very intrigue heavy, you don't necessarily want the players, you don't want to I assume it's going to be very intrigue heavy, and I think you've said that.
Intrigue. Sorry, go ahead, Pete.
What have you? If you're going to run a game that's going to be intrigue heavy, or there's certain tasks that you're going to want your players to do, even if they don't necessarily understand what the goal is of these kind of early arcs that you're creating, they should at least understand that we're kind of looking for mysteries, and we want to solve mysteries. So when we find tidbits, like a strange stone or a cloaked figure, we want to pursue those things and learn about them, because that's what this adventure is, and that's what we're kind of quote unquote supposed to be doing. You want your players to be attuned to the kind of things that you're going to be presenting. And for a more straightforward game that is zero intrigue, perhaps, like I was saying before, the classic, there's a dragon that's threatening a town. It's a great idea if the players know that they're working towards, well, yeah, at some point we're probably going to have to battle this dragon. Whether or not you battle the dragon is irrelevant. It can be any number of plot twists. Maybe it's not a dragon. Maybe they never end up encountering it and it kind of flies away. But them having something that's kind of driving them and pushing them for it, whether it be, right now we're looking to investigate mysteries, or we're trying to locate this creature. That's a great way to give the early kind of beats of a campaign structure and start to start to like draw the players in and make them feel like they're starting to accomplish something. 'Cause I think that's a
Yeah,
big part
I can.
of the early game is getting that early sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly. That early sense of accomplishment and placing those early mysteries in. You can just as easily say there's a red dragon harassing that town, and that is a very straightforward. There's a red dragon harassing that town. Oh shit. Um, but at the same time, right? You could take it a little more. How do you put it? Like,
Well,
I don't know. I feel like you can be
you
more
can
discreet.
abstract it a lot more than that.
Yeah, I mean, let's say like your first plot hook, right, could be that there are goblins attacking the town, right? There are goblins attacking your town, and the players go and they go to fight the goblins, and out in the woods they find a, all of the goblins and a bunch of baby goblins, and it's like, well, why aren't they in like their burrow? Right? It's like you can describe they're clearly uprooted. They have all of their meager goblin belongings, and this is a really interesting. I mean, first you immediately throw them into a horrible moral dilemma of killing baby goblins.
The
But
classic.
secondly, right, you have them immediately ask this question: what scared the goblins to hear? Like something scared them out of wherever they came from, and that is that mystery, that little bit of like why. And players want to know why because, well, if something scared the goblins, that's could be scary to us. We need to know about that, and that's how they learn about like the red dragon or what have you.
And this is how you also start kind of weaving your quests together, because I
Mm-hmm.
think you don't want to have necessarily an obvious chain about how, where at the beginning of the game they're going to get to where they're going. They shouldn't necessarily know every step of the process, from the start. I like the idea of there being this kind of, driving force, like, there's some mystery that we need to investigate one way or the other, as the overarching thing, but having it segmented out like that. They go to the goblins and learn about what drove the goblins out, and then they go to that where that nesting creature was supposed to be, and it's not there, and they're sent somewhere else. And that's the way to start to make it feel like an adventure, is having these different kind of sub point goals before reaching their ultimate one.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good idea. While we're talking about creatures and goals, we can also talk a little about factions in your world. We talked about them fairly recently, but session 0 or session 1 rather is a really good opportunity to like formally introduce some of the factions. I mean, just looking into, I keep going back to Dragon Heist, it's fresh in my mind, but like in that session, I actually introduced what, 4 factions?
Um,
I don't know if you noticed, but I introduced 4
uh,
separate factions,
that
just
I am aware of,
or 5.
I actually would have. I actually would have wagered more. I don't know if you count like the denizens of the yawning
Oh,
portal as one.
no, I was not. I'm
Okay.
like distinct players, but like, I mean, yeah, and how I introduced them is an important note. So the 2 groups fighting in the tavern, right at the very beginning, the brawl. Right there, I've established both of them as well. They're both violent groups. They're both violent factions. And both of them are kind of outside the law as they're not following the rules of the tavern, right? So like uh I mean that like right there, that's an important distinction. Is okay, both of those, they're 2 separate factions that hate each other. They want to kill each other and they work outside the law. We look at the guards, right, that they ran into along the road. And they're very orderly, distinct, but they're also like they're trying to get to the bottom of what's going on, right? They care about figuring stuff out and keeping people safe. And
And another thing, another point about these is never, and as always, never comes with the asterisk, which is maybe sometimes, but never include something like Jeremy was just talking about, like these 2 factions in the bar kind of brawling. Never do that just for the sake of showing off the factions. Always make it
oh yeah,
part of the player's kind of story. So I think the wrong way to do it would have been to just kind of, if Jeremy had just said that tavern brawl happens, and just basically described that tavern brawl happened, and then one group walked out in a huff, defeated, and the other one had won, or any kind of outcome that he had gone with. Instead, it became part of the kind of the player's problem. It became a combat for one thing, but there's also more than I think a combat. I think the more important and more engaging aspect of it is that it's a choice. We look at the situation going on here and we see two opposing sides. Which side do we take? And to a degree, that was defined by some stuff that we had kind of worked out in. We had kind of worked out in our session 0, in that James had a connection to one of the characters, the player who was playing. I have not learned everyone's names yet. Fildry. But in kind of presenting the situation, it gave everyone in the bar this opportunity to think, well, how much do I care about this individual that Fildry is stepping up to help? Do I want to get involved in this? Whose side do I want to get involved on? Like, what is important to me as a character? And it's great when you can introduce factions and introduce ideas under the guise of, these are story moments, these are choices that you get to make, this is the reason you play D&D. You're playing a game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, to the same end, right, just the faction symbols that were introduced throughout that are kind of I think, pretty cool.
I've learned 1.5 of those.
1.5 feet? Which ones have you learned?
I learned the Zentarum, and is the other one the symbol of Xanathar?
Which one?
The one that we were at the end with it was like the sun with the points coming out of it or something?
I don't know, Pete. You're going to have to find it.
Yeah, fair enough. I learned the Zentarum one, though. I remembered it. It's a snake. I think we talked about it in session 0, and I didn't remember it from that.
But Pete, did you notice the Harper?
I actually did not notice a Harper.
Oh, there was a Harper. I was very clear to describe their little silver harp pin.
I didn't notice the Harper. That one went.
Pete, you missed the Harper.
I was saying, I was talking to Jeremy about this before.
Crowley noticed the Harper.
I was very intent on making jokes, so I was distracted. So Jeremy, here's a question for you. How long do you think, in your opinion, how long do you think the first quote-unquote arc, and just to be clear, I've spoken a lot about story arcs and talked about those, and what I mean by that is just a set of missions that ultimately ends in a goal, but just like kind of the first few quests that tie into each other.
I mean, it's a part of your game, right? That like looking back, you'd say, oh yeah, these were the first session.
Yes.
That collaboratively, what little mini story is told fills that out. I'm personally of the opinion it should be about 3 or 4 tops. I really don't like going more than that. If your first sessions drag on, right, you're trying, because your first sessions are to establish everything. And if you're trying to establish way too much, I think people just get really lost. So, I mean, I think it's kind of like a pick and choose kind of deal,
Yeah, and I think that ties back into that kind of idea of them wanting to feel like they've accomplished something early and having something that they can kind of put their stamp on and say, we wrapped this up, we did this thing that we set out to do. And it's always safer to have that happen sooner rather than later. So if you have to kind of choose, and you have like a choice of that, just choose to end it early, even if it feels like, well, that was kind of a quick thing. Well, that's fine. It's the start of the campaign. It can be a quick thing. There's nothing that you want less than to have the first sessions start to feel like a drag. Like some of the later arcs, once you really get into it, those are, I think, a little bit more okay to start extending things and letting things go on a little bit longer. But you really want something to kind of wrap your head around. And also, it kind of, I think it's important. It's important from a party chemistry standpoint.
Yes, I was about to say that.
Yeah, because it kind of solidifies a group as now that they've done a thing together, and like, oh, we went through this trial together. We are now a group of people that have bonds and connections.
Exactly, and especially, I mean, depending on characters' backgrounds, like, hey, we accomplished a thing and got some amount of gold. Wow, that's crazy. I'm more successful than I've been my whole life, right? Like, that's a very classic D&D character background. It's like, yep, I worked on the town guard. I got a gold per year, right? That's like that's a background. That's like a real character background. Uh, and yeah, no, I really like that like accomplishment, right? Like a little bit of reward of just something that feels good. It might be a magic item, it might be a little bit of gold, but I really dig that because eventually, no matter what happens, like the party's gonna run into moral dilemmas, and players and characters are gonna be on different sides of it. I mean, that's not necessarily inevitable, but it happens a lot because that makes an interesting story. It's dramatic, and you really want to make sure your party is a party when that happens. You know, I mentioned earlier the goblin children in the wood. Don't do that for your first sessions. I know I mentioned it, but don't do that specifically. Don't put them with a moral dilemma where it's like, oh, we're gonna murder children because like
That can
you
create
do
a lot
not
of kind
want
of
to be fracturing a party by session 3.
yeah, that
You're just
can make it very hard for players to initially trust each other, depending on kind of
precisely.
how deep into character certain players are being and how much they kind of draw their moral lines in the sand. Um, and it's great for players who want to draw those moral lines in the stand to not have them tested
Well,
immediately.
and here's the thing, right? I think Bionic Shiba saying I did that in my second session and it worked out great. Well, that's fair. If your players are going in with like a common ground, like a commonality, that works out fine. But in a more neutral, yeah, in a more neutrally minded party where you have some very good, maybe some not so good characters, you don't want to just immediately stress. You don't want to stress that tension right off the bat. But if everyone's evil, go ahead and give them that situation to just all
Well,
be
then it's
evil
not.
because that puts them into something together too, right? Like I know uh, a really great one is like, yeah, you're robbing a bank. That's your first thing. Yeah, you're all committing this big crime together, and that's your in, and that cements a party chemistry, right? Because hey, you're all in on this.
Yep,
There's no
I've done that exact first adventure before.
yeah, there's no getting out of it now. You're in. And I think those kind of things are really, really, um, they're really important, right? They're ways to keep everything running smoothly and keep everything.
Agreed. And while we're kind of talking about these first beats that you want to hit, I think another one to talk about is letting every character have an opportunity to shine at the beginning of the game. I think you want to go out of your way to put something in front of every character that is important to who they are as a character. You know, in the session we recently ran, for example,
Guys,
the
we're advertising Dragon Heist.
yeah, we're just
really
advertising
hard,
Dragon
you
Heist,
guys.
but
Watch our stuff.
the character Fildry is a locksmith, and there was a lock for him to pick, and there was a lock for him to talk about and to comment on because that's a major part of his character, and that's extremely important. Make sure that kind of every character gets to kind of show off their specialty, even if not necessarily on session 1 in the first arc. Test all of your characters' abilities. If there's if there's a cleric and you're a high lift level to have them turn undead, maybe give them the opportunity to do that if it suits the situation. If there's a character who defines themselves by their kind of theatrics, put perhaps any kind of thing that can let them ham that up a little bit. A theater troupe goes by for them to make derisive comments about from their lack of skill, or just anything to let their players delve into a little bit about who they are, because that's another way, just like getting to know characters from I think a meta perspective, and getting to see players' characters do what they do, that also cements party chemistry. Like, other players will start to feel an attachment to your character when they see your character doing the things that they do, and see who they are.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also love just like giving players fun stuff. Like one of the things I'm so stoked that you ran with in Dragon Heist was
Oh,
the
yeah,
purple haze.
I loved that. That was very
It
fun.
was a pretty good gag, and I'm really glad you took it because it's I don't know, that's just fun, right? It's a fun little thing that now is just there.
Yeah, and that's a tool that I'm gonna have
Yeah,
forever, and occasionally just can be like, oh, remember that time with the thing? I still have it, still got it.
but okay, that's what I'm trying to say. It's not like useful magic items, but garbage. Like that's the kind of thing that we'd put in Bartholomew's Big Bag Bonanza below. Like you roll below a 50, you're getting this,
Yeah.
and that's great. Giving little worthless magical doodads that can be fun or used in creative and bizarre ways that you can't even think of, right? Those are great. Those are fantastic. Those are a very, very good way of, yeah, like the bagpipes of invisibility. They're invisible bagpipes. Okay, sure. And I know that's not that's actually a higher than garbage level item. Those are actually pretty good. But anyway, the point is, like, giving those goofy, silly things is a lot of fun, and it gives the players something to play with and toy with, and they can make that a signature thing. Players establish their signature moves and their signature kind of how their character acts, right? Their personality very early on, and giving them some signature toys, cool magic items that are completely unique to you and your game. That's awesome because that really helps to make your game unique. Everyone's got bags of holding, but you're the only one that has, I don't know, underpants of holding, right? You just shove anything in your underwear and your Tommy Pickles underwear and it just holds whatever. And that's ridiculous. It's stupid. And then you have your, 100-year-old wizard players like, I'll wear it. And it's just funny, right? And that makes an excellent story for something that players will like always remember about your game, even if it doesn't totally pan out. Or even if it's a really short form thing that only is supposed to be 5 or 10.
And that sounds just so. The underpants of holding sounds so quintessentially D&D to me. Like that sounds like just the
Mm-hmm.
story of. I picture already a new player being like, yeah, when asked about, oh, how was playing D&D? Oh, at one point I got these things called underpants of holding, which I can just put anything in my underwear, and it was the most hilarious thing I've ever experienced. Like I can hear that new player being so excited about their underpants of holding, or whatever goofy thing that you decided to put in, because um, especially
Well,
those early things. I was gonna say those early things become
yeah.
a part of who a character is. Like I can already see that purple smoke that I got being a part of who my character is, and just being, a tool in their kit that comes up and is associated with
Exactly. And I love that kind of stuff. And you see, the underwear of holding, right? It's just a bag of holding. There's no difference. I just made it goofy. Hell, if you want to make it more serious, another cool flavor on it is it's the Book of Keeping. It's just a book with 100 blank white pages, and you can push an item onto a page, and it becomes just a picture in the book, and you can just pull it back out of the book. And great, you can have 100 items in that book. It's just a bag of holding, but it's got a cool, different, unique flavor that's super.
It's a very, very
It
flavorful bag of
feels
holding.
awesome, and it's something that your players. It's like if you give that to your players, they're just like, oh shit, this isn't like, especially if they've played a lot of D&D, they've gotten bags of holding, but they've never gotten a book of keeping. They've never got this. This is new to them.
Did you just make that up? Because I actually really
Yeah,
like
I
that.
just made that up. I really like it too.
That's that's an awesome
like,
item that I'm gonna steal immediately.
I'm gonna use the underpants of holding, but it's still good. But like, those kind of things are they're what help to make stories, right? Make them feel, I don't know, like unique experiences, because that's what you're playing D&D for. It's to get these experiences, to solve the puzzles, right? To follow all of these threads, to defeat the big bads who show up in the first session and decree their dominance over the whole universe or whatever. Right? Like,
You want to be heroes, and you want to have fun getting there.
exactly. And putting all these little tidbits, especially early on, can really help to make that a reality throughout your game.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I agree.
We definitely have been really all over the place this topic, but
Yeah,
I think
we've
there've been a lot of
bumbling today.
good things said too. So it's kind of like it's hard to.
What came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know if that necessarily
The
applies.
cockatrice came,
Oh yes. Um,
but then the chicken came.
so yeah, since we've been kind of all over the place, I don't know if we necessarily have like um, any other kind of points that you want to particularly get to on this subject. Um, oh,
I'm here.
hi, Jeremy.
I
For a
clicked on the
moment,
wrong thing. I was trying to get down to the Ask Pete and Jeremy tab in a minute, but
well, that's what I
no,
was going to recommend is that we ask Pete and Jeremy.
yeah, I guess to answer your other question, do I have any specific takeaways? Um, yeah, I mean, in the end, go ahead and put your little plot threads in. You don't have to go into a ton of detail. I mean, just to list off the number of things in Dragon Heist that are all going to be plot threads at some point. I described a hook horror head on the wall that the beak was hanging open. I discovered a little tiny glass marble that they captured. I described the silver pin on the bard in the yawning portal. I described the appearances of the two different factions in the brawl and the people inside and their different imagery and icons. I described a wagon chase deep in the night with two very distinct and unique wagons, one bright red and green, and another one with its house sigil painted black. Right, I described a hooded figure standing in the back of the room that seemed to give them information right when they needed it in a very mysterious way before disappearing. I described an anchor skewering a dragon painted on top of a building. Literally every single one of those things are future plot hooks. Every single one. And I'm sure there are more that I missed. And all of them, I think I described in about as many words in the session as I did right here. That's all you need to do. It's just mention as they come into the tavern and you describe the fiery hearth and the people sitting where they're sitting and the mounted on the wall there's a mounted hook horror head with its large beaked head where the beak now is hanging open. And that's it. That's all you have to describe, and that can become a feature later on. So
And one more kind of thing along those lines is your players are gonna, your players are gonna look at all these things that you've laid out and decide to kind of pick a thread to follow. You don't necessarily have to run all of your threads in a straight line.
oh yeah.
You can, once they decide, okay, we're going to investigate the hooked horror, the open mouth hooked horror, you don't have to do everything that's involved with that now. You can start to kind of, and this is where I think the quote unquote web of intrigue phrase starts to come from, is while they're following that, they get a piece of another thread. They lose the trail on one, but they pick up another thing. That they didn't necessarily realize the two were interconnected, and you can start to kind of weave your arcs together here and there. I think someone who's very good at this, from what I understand, is Mr. Perkins.
Perkins is some sort of mad magician, but
if you've never watched a Chris Perkins game, this is, I think, a thing that he is a master of, is kind of picking up plot lines and twisting them around and moving them here and there so that, you don't necessarily know what story you're about to step into.
In yesterday's episode, he had literally Tomb of Annihilation, Storm King's Thunder, Curse of he had like 5 different books open all in front of him because he was referencing stuff from everything at this pretty crazy. But anyway, not the point. The point is, yeah, just put these little notes in there because later on, if that hook horror head comes up again, the players will be like, oh, like they'll realize, and that's cool, and they'll remember it. So that's all I'm saying. Go ahead, feel free to put these little doodads in their little notes because they're fun.
Yeah. So with that, I think we've covered what we're going to cover for today's topic. But let us hop over to
Pete
and Jeremy. So want to just back and forth these?
Yeah. Let's see. Where were we at? There really are not a ton on here. Okay, question 1 by Mr. Plunder Loot. Where Narwhal?
Oh, I think that's in a reference to Reflected Tonight's question from last
Oh,
week. What
I
type of
know
lighting?
it is. Where Narwhal?
Where
Um,
I think I no, maybe it was a question. Where Narwhal?
where Narwhal?
Ocean is my answer.
Ocean. I agree.
Um,
Next question is from it's specifically adding me, Pete. So I'm going to take this one, then you can take the next two.
please do.
VBunny23 asks, why is lightning left out of the charm of elements and thunder left out of otherworldly might? I think they should be added on the account that the lightning's a third damage type the Dragonborn get, and you can have things like Storm Sorcerers and Storm Herald Barbarians and Storm Clerics who can benefit from lightning, and it is thematic. Well, that same answer actually is mentioned by Blood Deuce immediately after.
Crushed it.
Blood Deuce postulates maybe they're included in a third charm we have yet to see, and in fact they are. This is all referring to. Absolutely crushed it. This is all referring to Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time, the ongoing crazy show that we run every Friday here on the D&D Time channel, where we have 3 1 to 2 hour adventures featuring our viewers. And yeah, the charms are cool little knickknacks you can buy to power up your items. So yeah, there's just a third charm that y'all haven't seen yet, and that'll probably be around come February 1st. So I'm full of
Yeah, absolutely. So next question we have here, Reflected 10-8 asks, favorite dumb item you've ever received? Jeremy, do you have one in mind?
Oh shit. Oh, IRL or in character. I like this.
Oh, IRL.
Oh, my favorite dumb thing I've ever gotten in real life. Oh shit. Okay. Mine sounds real. I'm sorry, a dumb item or like.
Oh wait, in that case, I have mine. Hold on a second. I'll be right back. You can keep talking, Jeremy. I'll just go get
son
mine.
of a bitch. And of course, Pete's gone now. But what was it? Yeah, my favorite items. I think I really am a fan of the Wand of Wonder, but I don't know if it's my favorite dumb item in 5e. I really, really love anything that's like elemental powered. I know Princes of the Apocalypse introduced some really cool magic items that you could like power with elemental stuff. Like I know there's a balloon backpack in there that's like really neat. I love those because they're just so goofy sounding, but they also like make sense in the context of the world. Like, yeah, I captured an air elemental. I stuffed it in a backpack. But yeah, I think that was my answer for D&D magic items. Pete, show me your dumb real life item.
I will hold it up to the camera now.
I can't see it. Wait, why am I? I need to open the thing with this. Oh, hey, look! Actually, shit, mine's one of those too. Where is he?
This, that is Jeffy. Bionic should be asking, is this Terry? I don't know if I've talked about Jeffy before by that question, but you were close. That's Jeffy. That's the character piece I've used for everything that every character I've ever played in real life. I use that character piece. A quick story, a quick backstory on Jeffy. I got him out of one of those like capsule machines one time, and oh yeah, I gave that thing a name for sure. I got him out of one of those capsule machines one time, and I just liked him, and so I kept him in like my glasses case for a really long time and scratched my glasses. And then I lost Jeffy, and I was like, whatever, not necessarily that significant. And then I found him a year later at a relative's house who was an hour and a half away, like half buried in a driveway as I kicked away a rock that he happened to fall under, and I found this thing that I lost after a year and a half. And I was like, now this thing is precious and important, and I will never lose it. So that's my favorite dumb IRL item I found. This is like if I rolled on the trinket table in real life. I rolled this little guy. He's my trinket.
Mine is also a character piece I've used in Dungeons & Dragons for quite a long. Oh, actually, you've never used him in Dungeons & Dragons, have you?
In D&D specifically? No, Acer and every character I played was Jeffy.
All right. Well, this is mine. It's a Psyduck.
Ah, yes.
It used to be a pencil topper a long, long time ago, and that's it. He's just a Psyduck. I love him. No.
And in game, one of my favorite dumb magic items, the first one that has come to my mind, is one that Jeremy gave me. Um,
Oh,
a character that uh, a character that was not necessarily super edgy, but kind of edgy. This was the Count from our Crucible game, and I always wanted to play the violin. And then Jeremy gave me a hat that would help me play the violin better, but it was a fedora. So I did have to choose whether I wanted to be able to play the violin in character, but in doing so, I would be required to wear a fedora, which was a very fun cursed magic item of sorts.
for that character in particular, that was a very cursed magic.
Yes,
That character would not want to wear a fedora.
he's very fashionable.
And I mean, mine's dumb. I just like the elemental backpack in Princess of the Apocalypse, where it has a inflatable balloon that has an air elemental in it, and then it has to be recharged. It's very dumb. You have to capture a new air elemental and stick it inside of your backpack to use it again. It's basically a parachute. It's troll. I love it.
The question, next question, I'm just going to field this one because I think it's directed mostly at me. Matty Moores, what is the name of the Rakshasa in the opening characters to the Friday game? And the answer is, I think just as that Flump, I think, is just named Jeremy, I think this Rakshasa is just named Pete. Me and Jeremy just both have our favorite monsters on there.
And the dinosaur wizard is just a dinosaur wizard. Not
Yeah,
even
unrelated.
the dinosaurs, he's just a dinosaur wizard.
Unrelated, completely
Yeah, there are
unrelated
many.
to anything.
I'll be real. If one of the things in Tomb of Annihilation is there's an NPC that's a saurian, which is a dinosaur person. And if dinosaur people were just an option in D&D, I would only play dinosaur people. Just straight up. I just love dinosaurs. I'm a dinosaur fan.
I always have found something appealing about the player that plays a specific race when they like eventually just kind of like have that race down and they have their own kind of like internal lore for what it means to be said race. Like, you know, the guy that only plays dwarves and has just a great dwarf voice.
Shiba, no, that's not going to be the next Bruce race. I don't think.
Dinosaur people.
Dinosaur.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Pete, what if we just do it? We just never stop to think if we should. Anyway, that was a bad reference there. Yeah. Anyway,
No,
that was a great way of not saying how much you hate dinosaurs in D&D. That was just a really, really good way to dodge that one.
I don't like dinosaurs in D&D. Just come at me, fight me. I think it's dumb.
Let's see. What else do we have in here? Is that? Oh, I see. Reflecting Tonight's thrown a couple other quick questions in, and I think these will be the last two for the evening. Favorite NPC a character of yours ever had a relationship with, be it romantic, friendship, or professional? And it has to be an NPC.
All right. I can pick one of these. A relationship that I really loved, that was a dynamic I had with another character, was in a game that Cardwatch was running, where we were. I was playing this character named Parker Smalls, who was a big troll, but he was kind of a troll with a heart of gold, and he was being used by the Mafia as kind of an enforcer. And the way he was used by the Mafia is the Mafia would just tell me that the people whose legs I was supposed to break were just bad people, and I would just kind of gullibly take it all on faith and go and just break the legs of anyone that they wanted me to, because I just assumed that they were thieves or something. And there was a great relationship with the Mafia boss, this character named Big Mike, who he was just like this equally. I was just this huge troll. He was a human that was somehow as big as me, even though I was a troll. And he would just kind of come over and like put his arm around me and whisper in my ear, "Yeah, you know, this guy over here, these goblins over here. Did you know that they like to kick children?" I'm like, "Just what? That's terrible. Why would they kick children? I'll break them in half." And like Parker had a lot of rules that he weirdly had to go by, where I always had to be home by dinner to make sure that I was there for dinner with my family and stuff like that at 7 o'clock. So it was this like big mafia boss that had to be beholden to like my mom, which I really loved that whole relationship. Jeremy?
Okay, well, my favorite NPC that a character of mine has ever had a relationship with,
Wait,
be
I
it
realized
romantic,
another good one, and I regret it
friendship,
immediately.
or professional. It's hard for me to say that because I don't have a lot of characters. I have a lot of NPCs because I DM a lot. I don't have a lot of characters. I'm gonna have to think about that one. It might have to be. I think it just by default. I'll have to think about this because now I'm between two. Go ahead, Pete. You had more to say.
Another one, I just realized Lao. I mean, that's quite how can I forget
yeah,
Lao? That's quite a dynamic.
yeah.
Just Crucible, because I was also thinking like Rose and Crucible. But if I had to pick one from that, it would have to be Lao. Who was a zombie my character essentially made, a mind slave that my character made that slowly regained sentience.
Yeah, I can't really come up with one off the top of my head.
Give
There
us
are definitely
give us
some,
like a rando one.
a rando one.
Yeah, not necessarily your favorite, but just one that you liked.
You see, it's very hard for me to like think too far back because I'm dumb. Probably in my most recent adventure through Curse of Strahd, where my wizard Matos the Beguiler fell in love with a ghost, and then brought him back to life with the only wish spell instead of stopping Strahd, and then left Barovia. Hopefully,
I think
forever.
"Fell in Love with a Ghost" is the name of an electronic artist that I really.
It was a fun plot line because he ended up getting a madness while in Barovia, and throughout all of his time through this hellish place, the ghost was the only thing that never let him down. And yeah, I mean that's sometimes that's just what you need. You just need a rock in your.
Also, make sure you check out "In Love with a Ghost" on SoundCloud. They're very good.
Is that like
they
a
do
real
lot of
thing?
lo-fi beats. Yeah, I really like. That's just a funny turn of phrase that you happen to say that has a lot of significance to me.
I could an actual thing. I like a couple of comments in the chat. Farvel saying I had a very antagonistic relationship with one of Jeremy's NPCs that we basically enslaved. Ended up killing him accidentally. And of course, then he asks, "What about the reverse? One of your NPC's relationships with a player character?" Oh, it was Bartimus. Bartimus was my favorite. Killing that donkey was my crowning achievement in Dungeons and Dragons.
Trying to think of one. I'm thinking of mine.
And I think we're gonna have to call it there because we have more work to do for DnDTime out.
Well, there was one more question that we said we do from Lance. Let's do it quick. Most game-breaking moment, either as a player or as a DM.
Game-breaking? That's a weird one.
Yeah, I guess I can pick one. At the end of my last campaign, I gave all of my players these godlike sort of powers. And
wait, I know what I did. You go ahead.
I gave all my players these godlike sort of powers, and I wanted them to be ridiculous and overpowered. And I gave one player who was a real min-maxer the ability to switch classes and class level arrangements as a bonus action. And he basically only had this power for the final fight. And it started out really slow while he was still kind of adjusting to the idea of using it. But I'm pretty sure in the final round of combat there was some paladin switcheroonies. There were some like become paladin action surge and become fighter action surge, divine smite, extra attacks. It was like the arrangement of things he did using this ability. It was in the range between I can't remember the number. It was between 300 and 400 damage in a single round for like the final hit of the campaign when he finally figured it out. And that would have broken the game had it not been the last session. But that was definitely game breaking. It was also a lot of fun to watch.
Hey Pete, you ready for me to one up the absolute fuck out of you?
Please.
I gave all of my characters 6 levels in Paladin free. With a year left in the game. Everyone became a level 6 Paladin.
I mean,
They were already level. They were already level 15 before that.
PQ could beat up your balance.
Everyone.
I think we've had these essentially penis measuring contests before, where we've talked about which party could beat which party on those specific campaigns.
Could my players defeat your characters?
Yeah, exactly. But with that, let's wrap up. Jeremy, do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
I don't. I'm a little zonked out personally, but it's been a good conversation. I'm really excited. What I'm not excited for is all of the work I have to do after this is done. I got nothing to say.
Goodbye,
no. Whoa, that was quick.
No,
Edmund's deck of... Okay, rewind, I'm trying to back again. No, the most busted thing I ever did is I gave a player a deck of cards. I would just deal them 7 cards at the beginning of every session, and they could use those cards just to buff. Red cards were to reduce bonuses to D20 rolls, and black cards increased D20 rolls. Aces were auto crits, ace of spades was an auto triple crit. And then in the final session, they had the whole deck of cards. That was a mistake. Okay, that was the dumbest thing of... Sorry. Okay.
Anyway, tune into our other shows. Tune into Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time Friday at 9 o'clock, where we play one-shots with players. If you're not already familiar with it, it's fun. You should join in on it. You should hang out with us. You should watch it. It's always a blast. I love it every time. It's a silly, goofy world. Come hang out, play D&D with we, as we sometimes like to say. Also, tune in on Sunday for D&D Time Brews, where Jeremy and I will be home brewing something. I don't know if you said anything about it in the announcement, what we're going to do, but...
Nope.
Good, because I don't... we'll
Guys, dinosaur people!
TVA.
Guys, if you really want a downer, make sure to watch my episode of D&D Time on Friday, game number 2. It's going to be really dark.
Well, there it is, folks. And
all
also,
right.
I'm Pete.
I'm Jeremy.
And this is D&D Time Talks.
Talks.
Good night, everybody.
Everyone.